I'd like to get started here. I'm excited to kick off our policy workshop this morning, focusing on labour and sustainability. And with that, I would just ask that Jennifer Wright come to the podium to introduce the first panel focused on the National Workforce Strategic Plan. And with that, I'll invite Jen to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks, everyone. I'm here to talk this morning about the National Workforce Strategic Plan, and we have a great panel that will have a conversation about what that National Workforce Strategic Plan is and what it means to you. So before I get through my intro, I'll just invite the panel up. First, Julie Bissonnette, who many of you will know. She is the CYFF Vice Chair and part of the Quebec Young Farmers, as well as a CFA board member, so thank you. And she's also a member of our board, the CARC board, which is great. Sierra Couturier is also part of CFA board, part of the Kaya board, and is a past chair for CARC, as well as our treasurer, and as many of you know, works with the Marine Institute around aquaculture. Peggy Breckfeld, again, lots of familiar faces up here on the panel. Peggy is the president of OFA, the CARC vice chair as well, and a producer in Northern Ontario. And Brenna Mahoney, who is also on the CARC board, but also is the executive director or general manager with the Keystone Agriculture Producers. So thank you very much for joining us. And I'm just going to give a bit of an introduction about what the Workforce Strategic Plan is, and then we'll get into a conversation about what it means, the value of it, and how to use it more locally than just at that national level. So for those of you that might not be aware of the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council, we're a national nonprofit, we're industry-led, and we work to identify and address workforce issues and HR issues across the industry. And so we work with producers in primary agriculture to identify the things that you need, help look at the skills of your workforce, and certainly a main focus of our work is that labour shortage, which is really becoming a labour crisis. And so we do a lot of labour market research around that, as well as skills identification and training, a lot of collaboration and networking and that type of thing. And although this data is a little bit old, and I'm very pleased to say that we've just received funding to update this data, we will have really fresh, good data come this summer. But as many of you know, and you're experiencing regularly, there is a labour shortage that's really moved into a labour crisis, and that shortage, we know this data is from 2018, we certainly know that it hasn't gotten any better. And so from our perspective, we have thought a lot about what we could do to ensure that there's action to move things forward, and that we can bring industry together so that we can amplify the great work that's happening by many organizations and many individual employers, but also look together as an industry where those gaps might be and how we can work together as an industry towards the same goal. And that's the reason that we came up with the thought that let's build a strategic plan for the industry that will really help address this workforce crisis. And so that the approach that we've really taken is that it's really based on action. And so similar to what you would do in your own organizations in building a strategic plan, this is very much the same idea, where there's mission, vision, objectives with KPIs for each of the areas of action as well. And so you might have seen this diagram quite often, but this was developed with industry input and a lot of industry volunteers to take a look at the big issues and what seems like a very complex, almost too big of a bear to try to tackle. We work together with industry to really try to piece it out into manageable sections that we can look at the issue in manageable ways and be able to address each area to help move things forward. And so I don't expect you to be able to read this, but it's just to give you an idea that this truly is a strategic plan. It has goals, it has objectives, it has KPIs. And there's many organizations and individuals that will look at this and will look at how they can move things forward. So the vision of the activity or the initiative is really to be able to say that Canada's agriculture and food and beverage manufacturing sectors they're experiencing a labour shortage, obviously, but by working together through a national actionable roadmap, we'll create the desired workforce of the future. And so for us, what does success look like? By 2030, the agriculture and food and beverage manufacturing sectors will have a vacancy rate that's lower than the Canadian average. And so, as I said, this work has been all through industry-led initiatives. I will say CFA has been a huge supporter of this work from a primary production side of things, and without CFA's leadership and commitment to this project, we wouldn't be to where we are today. We also have working groups and many advisory committees as well. We have over 65 industry representatives working in various ways day to day, and then many other champions that are moving the conversation forward as well. Also, very pleased to say, I know many of you will be familiar with AAFC's National Agriculture Labour Strategy and their skills table. We work very closely with the department as well. Our focus is really on let's not duplicate, let's collaborate. And so we are very pleased that we have open dialogue with the department, and we share what industry tells us through our process, so that when they're building their own agriculture labour strategy and the work that they do, they have a true understanding of what industry's priorities are and how industry would like to see some of these issues addressed. And so it really is a whole of industry approach. We really do feel around the table that this chronic labour shortage is having a severe impact on the prosperity and of the industry, and that by working together, we can help address that, help address the crisis and move things forward so that we have a very strong industry going forward. And so that in 2030, we're not still having the same conversations about the issues with the labour crisis. So with that, it just gives you a little bit of a background on where our conversation will go today. And really what I wanted, what we would like to share is, this looks like a big national labour strategy. What does it mean? Is it to you as a producer? What does it mean to you as a representative from a provincial federation? How can you apply this to your day-to-day work, and how does it have an impact on what you're doing? And so that's what we'll talk about today with our panel. And I'm just going to open up with the first question, and each of our panelists will have a few minutes to respond. But just as by way of introduction, we're just going to start. Julie, what does the National Workforce Strategic Plan mean to you?
Oui, merci Jennifer.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I hope it's working. Well, to me, the strategy, the most important part of it is to see the situation overall. We talk a lot about labor and workforce, but there are several different aspects. There's long-term, there's short-term. Yes, I'll give you a second to put on your headsets. I'm realizing that there's a lot of movement around me here right now. So, okay. This strategy is about realizing all of the various aspects of this issue and having a longer-term vision, not just a short-term vision. We're looking to the long-term to ensure that agriculture has the means to fully realize its ambitions through our workforce, and we can come together with common strategies, not just each find our own short-term or long-term solution for ourselves, but in discussions we can find long-term solutions for all of us. And in summary, this is a tool that we have to really take a hold of this issue and move forward. To me, it's the long-term that really matters, trying to see the issue overall and finding these long-term solutions.
And that's certainly what we're looking at, as well as that organizing on the long term. Cyr, what are your thoughts? What does it mean to you?
Well, can you hear me? Okay, good enough. I usually speak quite loudly anyway, unless Sandy tells me to shut up. Right, Andy? I'm only kidding. What it means to me is essentially almost all segments of the ag and agri-foods industry in Canada, the 2.3 million people that work in this industry. There's a chronic shortage, as Jen's already said, but there are solutions that will be common. And so I'm very hopeful that we can find those solutions. I'll give you an example. In aquaculture, we have the same issues needing foreign labor to move to rural areas, for Canadians to understand, that seafood farming is farming, and it's the same terminology. So I believe, this strategic plan that's going to come out of this is going to address a lot of those issues. It's going to require a lot of effort by not just the ag industry, but all of the other stakeholders, the academics and the universities and the colleges that are doing the training, the on-farm training that farmers might do, and those sorts of things. So I think it's really starting to bring up the awareness of Canadian agriculture. We've heard for the last 25 years we have a bad perception in society, and continue. So I'm just hopeful that by raising this issue on the labor shortages, chronic labor shortages, that we will get better understanding from Canadians, and that Minister Qualtrough supports this. Minister Bibeau, of course, supports this, and when we met with her just before Christmas, she was very keen to get the interim report that I don't know if you have that in your package, but to help her resolve the whole labor issue. So that's what it means to me. It just means we're working with farmers across the country to find solutions and common solutions across all segments of ag and agri-foods.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Peggy.
So representing a producer organization, I often think that we can go to government and say we have a labor problem, and they will say, so what's the answer? Or what is the problem? Without data like this and current data, you actually have a much weaker argument and ability to say we have ways forward and you can be a part of it. I appreciate the fact that a national workforce strategy gives us the chance to, number one, contribute and ensure that all voices are heard. Collaborative was the word that Jen used, and I think that's important. I also think that bringing solutions is often the best way forward with government. They certainly have a workforce that understands the challenges in front of us. I don't always think that they understand the solutions that would really work on the farm and on our greenhouses and in our industry and our processing. So the work that's being done in the 5 different focus groups and the overall themes, I think, give a broad solution to the agriculture questions.
Thank you, Peggy. And I can also say that when the National Agriculture Labour Strategy appeared in the Minister's mandate letter, and we reached out to say that industry had been working on this collaboratively for a year, they were very pleased to hear that, because industry was already ahead of the curve and we're bringing solutions quickly. So that's great. Brenna.
Thanks, Jen. Well, first of all, what this means to me, especially as a provincial organization that's also representing primary agriculture, this is really a roadmap. We don't need to duplicate this. You know, if you're representing producers in your province, you don't need to do the work. The work's already been done for you on how we address these issues. It's very applicable. It's very adoptable. It's essentially a roadmap to identify this isn't just about even on-farm jobs. What is the totality of what's needed to support our sector? It's been something that we've adopted for part of our CAP labor task force that we have in our province. It really essentially gave us the tools and the direction of where we needed to go. We actually sat down about 1.5 years ago and said, okay, well, what do we do? And it was before this had come out, but I was actually on part of the working group for this process. And I thought, okay, we need to stop. Let's not duplicate. Let's work within this system. So I would definitely ask all of you to participate in it. Pay attention, because the work's been done for you. And ultimately, I think when we look at that movement through time, as Julie talked about, we're looking at long term. We as a sector know how good we are. We know how resilient we are. But if we don't have the people to be able to support the sector, we're not going anywhere. And I look at the Barton report of 2017 outlining, what's our potential? We need people. So this is something that'll be adaptable, I believe, over time as well. This isn't just looking at it as a snapshot of today. This is something that will move through with us and adapt with us as a sector to make sure that we have that long-term resilient plan, to make sure that we are really upskilling people and that we're identifying opportunities for our future.
Great, excellent, thank you. And that really does give some good perspective on, the work that we're doing. And we you touched a little bit on this in your comments, but the value of collaboration and what that can really mean in moving things forward and everyone kind of coming together to address the issue instead of trying to really address it yourself. And I think is something that we were really trying to support, obviously, through this process. But I'd love to hear your perspectives on that value of collaboration and taking that approach where industry comes together and, works together, not just at the national level, but as Brenna has said as well, bringing it down through using the same terminology and framework at various levels of work as well. So, Peggy, do you have some thoughts on that?
Sure. Everybody's workforce is different. For some of us, it's our just us. Some of us, it's us and our parents, or some of it's us and our spouse. Some of us have workforces of 300 people that come from other countries. And some of us have the ability to connect with the local community. They vary in age from students to retired people who just want 2 hours every day just to get out of bed and do something. Saying that variety, and that's only in the people that are working for us, never mind the type of farm you have or the work you have to do. Collaboration is about us coming together and saying, so there's lots of variety and we could all fight for different things, but there are some things we are united in. There is a shortage. We don't have enough people working on our farms. So let's talk about how do we improve those numbers? How do we make change? Some of the answers are long-term things. I see a couple people here who have been fighting this file for lots of years and being engaged. A few whiteheads. But I will say that continuing to push those issues or ensuring that programs that work, seasonal ag worker program, temporary foreign worker program, if there are pieces in there that work, that we maintain those. Those are valuable. But also, there are some new solutions. Technology has moved us a long ways and is changing our workforce. So let's ensure that we get that part of the conversation too.
Excellent, great, thank you. Julie.
Bon, Peggy pas mal.
Well, Peggy said a lot of what I would have said, and I agree that everyone is different, every farm is different with different labor issues. We have young farmers who don't even have the means to have labor, and if they do have the means, then they have to compete with the industry in the village that also wants that labor. And so for some, it's seasonal. Just for young farmers, it's very, very varied. So I can just imagine when you talk about all commodities, all regions throughout the country, it becomes very, very vast as an issue. But as Peggy has said, we're thinking long term. We want to ensure that we have these discussions, all of us together, to find these common solutions so that we can move forward and all ask for the same types of solutions. We also want to look for solutions that will stand the test of time and solutions that everyone is comfortable with. And I think that if we concentrate on the long term, then it becomes less of the specific issue, short-term issues, licensing or so on. Yes, right now we have to fight for these things, but when we're looking at a longer-term solution, we have to find all of the right tools so that we're all headed in the right direction, even though we have different realities. And that's how we can succeed and find solutions to these issues.
Excellent, great, thank you. And I think Sierra and Brenna, you touched on this too in your comments, so let's get into the meat a little bit of the discussions that we have around the working groups and some of the policy work that, or policy discussions that we're having. And certainly I know when we first came out with this, you know, the conversation around a workforce strategic plan that wasn't just, we're moving beyond the idea of, you know, if we have a really good campaign and we build awareness about jobs, people will come and work for us and that'll address the issues. I think we're at a point now where we need to take a broader, more holistic approach to some of the issues that are, you know, we're coming across that are impacting that ability to attract the workforce. And so when you see some of the themes that are in the plan, you might think, well, what does that have to do with labor, or what does that have to do with my workforce? And we've been having a lot of conversations around ensuring that infrastructure is in place, rural infrastructure, you know, because how do you attract people to come live in your rural communities and to work, and that's where you're getting your workforce from, if that infrastructure is not there. Affordable housing, access to housing, internet, doctors, things like that. Same with technology. What's that impact of automation technology having with not only attracting people to work on the farm, but also, you know, what are the skills that they need and how is that changing? And how is that impacting the current workforce that you have? And, you know, always keeping an eye on the competitiveness and profitability of the industry. Certainly our data is showing things where, you know, it showed earlier the loss of revenue and, you know, the inability to expand because you don't have enough workers is significant. So we always have to be, you know, keeping an eye on that as well. So I thought we'd just turn our conversation a little bit with the panel to some of these areas and lenses that do have an impact on attracting and retaining the workers on your farm. And so if we talk a little bit, think a little bit about that impact, as I mentioned, on digitalization, automation, and technology. What does that look like for skills, for the number of people you need, for the workforce that you need, and the adoption, the ability to adopt that technology within your operations as well? So let's start with Brenna. Just move things around down the table.
Sure. We're just jumping around. I like that. Well, it's actually interesting, Jennifer, and I'm glad we're talking about, like, what do these things actually mean? And I am going to bring it back down to a provincial level. So through our Labour Task Group, where we've adopted this model as the guiding force behind the work that we're doing, it is very collaborative, by the way, because when I see collaboration, I see on the other side of that relevancy. So the more you increase your collaboration, the more relevant you're going to be. So we all know that veterinary shortages is a global issue. This isn't just a Manitoba issue or a Canadian issue. This is a global issue. And so when we sat down and said, how do we address this in Manitoba? Who needs to be in that room to be able to have that discussion? So that was kind of the first step. The second step is, okay, well, we know that retention of the veterinarians in the province is their biggest opportunity. That opens up a whole other can of worms. And thankfully, yet again, it's found in this graph. You know, we need infrastructure. If we're going to be expecting large animal vets to be where our producers are, well, then that means that they're going to be having to live in the rural areas in which our producers live and thrive. So do we have proper daycare? Do we have shopping facilities? You know, what are the things that these professionals are looking for to help keep them there? So even when we look at infrastructure, we have to think about those elements. You know, what tools are going to be available for them? Are they going to be able to hire support staff? So is there administrative support in that area? You know, we got to partner with the municipalities. We need to partner with different colleges to make sure that we're really targeting people and having these conversations. And I'm going to answer just one more thing. You know, my background's not in agriculture. My background is in textile sciences and actually then human resource management. I never thought agriculture was an option for me. When I was in university, the Aggies were the farm kids. it wasn't like there was a total barrier there. That absolutely still exists. I feel, one of the biggest things that we can do to help when we talk about, needing data specialists or, HVAC or, the automation requirements and the technologists needed to support that part of the sector, they're all out there. They just don't know that we exist. So I think when we look as well about the opportunity for us and kind of a North Star in all of this is making sure that we're working through groups like Agriculture in the Classroom, and I know they're all across Canada, but where are people at and how can they connect with agriculture that makes sense for them to even know it's an option for them to have a great career? And I think that's really at the heart of this is, we know we have this labor challenge. We know that there's significant barriers from, not having the rural support, but most importantly, do they even know it's an opportunity? There are lots of great people graduating from universities right now, and is agriculture on their radar? And I think that's something that this outlines as one of our greatest opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you, Brenna. And Cyr, from, you see these students coming through day to day, working in the post-secondary level. What are your perspectives on, raising that awareness and raising, I guess, making sure that the graduates are coming out with the skills that match, the very changing dynamics in the workforce with technology and automation?
Well, to start on the issue of meeting the skills requirements, what most colleges and universities should be doing, if they're not doing this already, the ag ones in particular, is understanding where the industry is going and what kind of skills are required. So we've, in the skills working group, we're looking at that currently, and we do have a couple of the ag colleges that are part of our skills working group. So Brenna, excuse me, she's going to punch me in a minute, but okay, got to keep me on the straight and narrow. So we do have a shortage of veterinarians in all rural areas of Canada. One of the biggest challenges, I think, which is also an opportunity, as Brenna mentioned, is connecting with people that are outside of rural areas. Canada is 70% urban, 30% rural, right? So, and that's where you have to have that connection with the urbanites to make them understand that, there are good careers in your sector. And in terms of skills development, at the university that I work in, we just keep in touch with industry continuously in the shellfish, finfish, or even seaweed farming, and make suggestions on how they can upskill their work. And we teach this kind of stuff to the students. So the faculty themselves, the institutions themselves promote the industry quite extensively. And I think that's, and by bringing industry in, and you get some interest. But what Brenna said is really a challenge. In some very rural, remote areas of the country, it's really hard to get younger people to come in and want to live there. There's lack of infrastructure. There's a variety of other issues, medical issues. If you want to raise a family, if you've got a couple coming, you want to raise a family, well, you're going to probably want a daycare or some services for your children and all of this kind of stuff. So I think that's where communities where we do have farming across the country are starting to. Well, I'm going to speak for Newfoundland. On the south coast of Newfoundland, all of the communities that are where aquaculture is support aquaculture because it benefits their communities, and they're willing to chip in some money to make things better for their communities and advocate on behalf of the industry. So that's what, as farmers, that's what you have to do, provincially and even federally. But in terms of skill development, in that particular group, we are looking at future skills. It's part of this Future Skills project, and there is going to be a lot more IT kind of stuff, the Internet of Things, smart farming, and that's just a fact of life. And you need to teach that stuff at the universities and colleges for the new ag entrants.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. And that's a good segue into a conversation Julie and I were having this morning about young farmers and that access, what does automation technology mean to a young farmer? And you had a very interesting perspective that I think would be great to share as part of this conversation as well.
Donc, les technologies, c'est...
Well, yes, technology are beautiful, that's true. It is a solution, but we see today that with inflation, with the increase in interest rate, young people in our sector have a hard time. And I believe that, yes, this might be a major issue. Technology is beautiful, but it has a short lifespan. It is a great asset, but it's not easy for the young people. They have to invest in order to get into technology. So, and to update, of course, the company as well, but it comes at a cost, and so technology might not always help them at that point.
And thanks for that perspective. And that's certainly something that, as our conversations around technology, automation, and digitalization go with these as part of this process, I certainly hear lots of times that if you automate, then you're not going to need as many people. And I had a really good example given to me where, when you get a dishwasher in your kitchen, it doesn't mean that there's less people there to load the dishwasher. You now actually need someone to rinse the dishes, put the dishes in the dishwasher, run the dishwasher, and then unload it, and hopefully put the dishes away. And if you're at my house with teenagers, that's just me doing everything, but that's another story. So when we talk about the technology and the impact it'll have, and that idea that it's not necessarily meaning less people, but it may mean different skills. Peggy, what's your perspective on that?
What I like about automation and technology being a part of this strategy is that it's about thinking outside of the box. So often we are just thinking about how do we get more workers. Automation and technology talks about a changing workforce and about potentially attracting people that wouldn't necessarily be first to want to handle cows or work with tomatoes. I do think that thinking outside of the box is things such as, in my northern community, we had two farmers who wanted to go to milk robots, and we don't have a technician. We are 8 hours from Steinbach, and we are a lot more hours from a technician in Southern Ontario. So how were we going to have robotics in Thunder Bay? And their solution was they went to the company and said, let us be the technicians on our own robots. And it took a little bit of convincing, but it did happen. What was interesting was those two farmers bought 2 robots each to start, had 4 in our area, and in a community of 24 dairy farmers, I think we now have 17 of them with milk robots. And we have a technician, because we actually have 2 that can actually do this work, because we came to that critical number of people with robots that we could support one. It took thinking outside of the box. How are we going to do this? And that's what a strategy like this has to be. We have to think outside of the box. If the perception of agriculture or the awareness of jobs in agriculture is low, how are we going to change that? What are we going to do different? Staying the same won't be the answer, but we have possibility to change those things. And so with the collaboration, I think we can do that.
Excellent. Thank you for that perspective. And staying with you as well, and we'll get the perspective from everyone, but, we started this process as very industry-led and industry-driven, and it remains that way. But as we have these conversations, the policy side of things does come through, and there's certainly very important policy, I don't know if changes is the right word, but certainly policy issues and recommendations that can be made to government and that kind of thing that are coming through these conversations as well, and very much aligned with the impact on the workforce and addressing labor shortages. And it could be anything from, ensuring that the temporary foreign worker policies are maintained and expanded if in certain commodities. It may be access and support for more rural internet and moving that forward faster, as we often see is in many mandates. So, Peggy, I would really like to hear your perspective on the role of industry as well as government in addressing this labor crisis.
Industry, in the end, is the farmers on the ground. It's the people there that have their business, have their farm or their greenhouse, etc., their ranch. Industry has a role of not just complaining to themselves, but actually bringing forward the challenges that they have and the solutions. And government has the ability to adjust regulation, to continue to maintain safety for the worker and proper rights, etc., but also to assist us as we bring, as employees need to bring people in. There's been some great solutions that have had initial uptake and then not quite completed the cycle. One I can think of is the preferred employer status, and I have the title wrong, but the idea that those that have brought in workers from other places frequently, that they have the ability to reduce the paper load because they've done this so many times so well and not had any challenges or concerns. I think something like that, industry is leading the conversation that this is a way forward. Government has the ability to make a change that would make our lives easier. So certainly in this conversation, I think those things are going to be highlighted again, those tools that we can make better than they currently are. And hopefully we can get some traction, because it won't just be one industry saying that this would make a difference, but many of us.
Yeah, excellent. And Brenna, from your perspective as working with government on the provincial level probably almost daily, as well as industry, what's your perspective?
Thanks, Jennifer. It's interesting. The message that we're really giving government is, agriculture matters to everybody, and when agriculture does well, you do well. So, our local economy will continue to increase. Like, we need that, for example, that value-added product to continue to be processed in Manitoba. We need to attract more businesses. Well, part of that is labor, right? So your buy-in on, clearing a pathway for future employees in agriculture is good for you to get that further increase in investment in the province. This also would fit nationally too. It's actually interesting because when we went down the road of the Labour Task Group in the province, government's actually at the table. It's co-chaired by the province of Manitoba, and that's to allow that two-way dialogue on how we drive solutions on labor together. And I think there's really good examples actually that have come up through our Labour Task Group, and we have a representative from Manitoba Pork here, but something that they're looking at is, around that veterinary technicians, or even for veterinarians. We have landed immigrants that have come that actually are veterinarians. What's the pathway to, make them veterinarians in Canada that isn't a 6 to 8 year long process? Like, how can we work together on that? So I think it's really about focusing on, that making clear pathways. And I think we've learned a lot from COVID as well. And this is a conversation I think we can share on a few levels, but we can make regulatory and legislative changes quite rapidly. We saw that throughout COVID. What's the red tape? What's the barrier that we can remove to make these things happen? Another really good example in the province is, High Life in Nipawa. So we have a whole rural community that was, frankly, it was dying, that is now alive and well, and it's increased investment to the province. The town itself is thriving and growing, and there's grocery stores and restaurants, and the whole area is thriving because of agriculture. If we can start having more of these conversations and outlining what made that successful, a lot of it had to do with government making pathways for entry. And I think that that's where, when they have the critical role that they have, is being a part of that conversation and recognizing that they they are creating the barrier. And ultimately, it comes back to the first thing I said. When agriculture does well, they do well. We know agriculture is a main economic driver. We know it has the potential to actually do more. And if we do not have the right people in the right place, and then we don't have the policies to support those people getting to where they need to be, then we're not going to be able to meet those expectations that the Canadian government has laid out.
Excellent. Thanks, Brenna. And certainly what we're finding too is through this process, we're able to bring industry's needs and priorities together in a very succinct way that we can then inform the government. And certainly from a policy perspective from government, policies aren't good if they're not informed by those that have to live by the policies. So the more that we can increase that level of communication and get the industry message through, a process such as this is pretty good, I think. So we're quickly running out of time. And we want to make sure that we open up the floor to a conversation with those in the room as well. So I'm just going to ask you each to share a little bit. I said what the vision is for this strategic plan, but what does success look like for you? Where are we at 2030? Either through this process or as an industry as well. Julie, I'll start with you.
Merci. C'est sûr, c'est pas simple.
Well, thank you. Well, for sure, it's not simple as a strategy. It has many issues. The future, according to what I see, it would go through finding solutions to go forward altogether, as said, but also having all the skills, having all the options laid out, we could go forward and we can ensure that our labor is there. I mean, I know this is not an issue that is easy per se. I know that we don't have enough labor workforce to at times accompany us because we wanted to train people, but we need to work with people that have the skill set. And these issues could be dealt with if we transfer our knowledge with those who work with us, and I think that would be key.
Well, by 2030, I think we've already seen, if you look at CFA's tagline, representing 190,000 farm families and farmers. Well, 6 months ago or a year ago, we were saying 200,000 farm families. So we know that farms are either aggregating into larger businesses and things like that. So there will be new farms starting, but also there's a lot more drop-off probably in aggregation. So I think by 2030, I think what we will see in terms of the labor and skill stuff is a highly qualified workforce, less labor shortages. I'm hoping if the strategies are successful, we should have less labor shortages and a more diverse workforce. More women, more First Nations, more different people involved in the industry on your farms and in farming. So we're already seeing this in a lot of areas, and I think it's going to continue. It's the only real solution, right? I mean, if you look at the birth, I'm just talking about Newfoundland now. So Newfoundland, we're the only province in the last 10 years that has a net out migration of people, right? We can't get enough people. We can't make enough babies with the people that are there, and everybody's old, like me. So the only thing we got to bring in is we're going to bring in people to make babies and to farm the food and fish for it as well. So we're trying to think of a strategy in Newfoundland. It's a great place if you want to come there, but it is a problem in a lot of areas in Canada, right? And depopulation of rural areas where there is farming and food production. And so I'm hopeful that this strategy will at least have some ideas that will help the industry in all of the regions like that.
Great, thanks here. Peggy.
So the last study said that by 2030, we were looking at 123,000 vacancies. I'd like to see that down to at least down 25%. That would be success to me. And that would come from a combination of healthy immigrant or foreign labor sources, a combination of greater interest in our industry as a whole, and continued, actually not addressed by this strategy, but actual profitability so that agriculture is healthy and strong.
Excellent, thanks. And Brenna?
So I think it's twofold way that my perspective is on this. First of all, I want to see the adoption of this strategy across Canada. You know, this is something that impacts all of us in every province and every region. So I do believe that, you know, working provincially, you know, to work nationally as well, plugging it into national work as well is going to be really key to overall success. I think the other part of it is we already have talked a lot about it today, is that collaboration. You know, it's already started, the momentum is happening, but who else needs to be part of these conversations? Like I said, you know, here in, not here, but in Manitoba, where my heart always is apparently, is, you know, we've grown from our focus on labor exponentially within a 1.5 year period. We've essentially doubled. This isn't just about having committees where I believe ideas go to die a lot of times. This is about action. So every session we have is about action, and what we realize, okay, who else do we need to talk to? Who else do we need to bring in? And that really for me is success. Is by 2030, what I would like to see is not only this in place across Canada, where we can start to share and talk about what are our wins, because there's going to be wins, and you know, hopefully by doing that we're going to actually get that 25% as you want, Maggie. But then ultimately we're actually going to build an expansive network of the people who support agriculture, demonstrating that agriculture matters to everyone, demonstrating that agriculture is a driver within our economies, and demonstrating that it doesn't matter if you're working in transportation or you're working in, you know, data management, you have a role with us. And I think that's where the more people that we're bringing into this ag labor conversation, we're learning that. So that really is success for me, and I can't wait to see where we are in 2030, which is really not that far away. So we really got to hustle.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. So if there's any, we have a few minutes for questions from the floor. If you any comments, questions, or, you know, please feel free to come to the mic and either ask the panelists questions or maybe share what you're doing locally as well. Paul.
Bonjour, Paul Doyon.
Hello, Paul Doyon from Quebec. When we see this circle, the image we have here on the board, and each side, we see that we have more than what's in there. We talk about people living or rural area, going to the cities. And today, in villages where you only have 800 people, we have further less labor. And when we think about automation, well, yes, we need lifts, we need technicians. We need technicians that would be at the ready 24/7. We tend to talk about this amongst us. Before, we said that having workforce in our farms would need people that would know how to work on certain skills. But now we see that automation, we might have technicians that are there and that might not work during weekends, and that would be an issue. Let's talk with decision makers. How can we keep those skills in our rural area to better accompany the agriculture and agri-food? Do you want me to answer? Yes, I'm totally in agreement with you. Peggy did mention this with the robot and things like that. I believe that people in regions have to talk amongst each other to determine their needs, to determine the automation they need for their machinery, because there are opportunities for the industry. opportunities that would enable technicians to do the work. And they would come if many of us call them in. And we talked about villages where you have less inhabitants. These are issues we have broached with the government. And we ask, how can you help us to attract these people? Maybe we can have subsidies for new machinery to enable us to be to increase our capacity and also help us with all the different industry that can help in the agriculture area.
C'est nécessaire.
Truly, it is necessary that
also be healthy, avec docteur, avec l'école, etc. It's necessary for us to see strong villages and communities. We call them hubs in Ontario. We need healthy hubs. We need places where our workforce and farmers can go to school, have fun, etc. That is about infrastructure a lot. People don't want to move to a place that has poor broadband or no broadband and no internet. They want to live in places where they still can go and have a drink in the pub. We also need good roads and bridges. And we need connections to other places. All these things are possible. It's a bigger conversation. On the outside of your circle, you see the word infrastructure. That is one piece of it. I agree with you. We want it to be healthy, and then we will be healthy too.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I can say our conversations with economic development, regional economic development groups is, you know, especially with COVID, we had more people moving out of the cities, and this is great. They can live in a small town and keep working with their city jobs, but it's increased the pressure on services within the communities as well. And so, and those people aren't now available to work in agriculture. They're still keeping their jobs. The work from home also has meant that companies like, you know, some of the larger tech companies can recruit in rural areas so that, you know, you can work from home and you don't have to work on the farm or work in agriculture. And so then already a labor shortage happening there. Sorry.
No, it's okay. The other piece is that we also need places to fix our tractors. We need places to set up processing. If a processor wants to come, they need good electricity, etc. also. So it's a bigger question about not just our villages, but rural as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh.
I just wanted to add one thing. Sorry, I think there's also something about this that's introspective too. You know, there actually might be people in our communities that we just haven't identified yet. And I think even how we write our job descriptions of how we're looking for employees is actually, we sometimes create a barrier for ourselves. I look at job postings all the time. You know, I just posted as well at CAP for a job. And, you know, we're always talking about ag experience. Do you have ag experience? So sometimes when we're writing certain, like how we're looking for the people who are these technicians, maybe we need to be focusing on what the skills are, what upskills that they need, as opposed to focusing on just our lens of how we look at that role. Those people might already exist.
Yeah, very good point. Right, go ahead.
Okay.
Martin Caron.
To presentation. J'ai peut-être
I feel that you've touched upon a few comments when it comes to being competitive and efficient. This year we'll have a general assembly within the CFA to regroup producers across the country. With regard to labor shortage, I feel there's more and more paperwork, more administrative paperwork, whether that's the provincial level, at the federal level, even within the municipal level. Within these national strategies, because this was touched upon, and I'm thinking that we need to understand this issue more profoundly. We need to have a strategy. We need to trust producers when we're developing the strategy. So I just wanted to talk about the strategy. How could we be more productive? How could the state could become more productive?
No. Governments understand the need. Well, obviously, advocacy is a big issue. And, you know, when FCA has their annual meeting, every year when they meet with the ministries of agriculture across the country, labor is one of the top 3 priorities, right? And so for the industry to be competitive, they have to address those, not just the shortages, but also the upskilling requirements and the future needs. And so it's like many have said, Brianna has said, it's really a collaboration with industry and government. Now, we know that in this country, not every provincial government gets along with every federal government, so there's always politics involved, but as long as farmers stick together and work on the solutions across the country and collaborate, I think we can achieve some of that increased productivity as well as greater competitiveness, which is always an issue. One of the things that kind of I find, like even within an industry, and I'm going to talk about fish farming now, what makes you competitive is not, you know, it's how efficient you are. So we might have 3 salmon farmers that bring in, let's say, $1 billion each in production on the farm, and they can't get enough labor to farm. So they raid each other's farms, and they're all living in the same neighborhood, right? So that's going to actually attract young people to come, because, you know, you're not talking about $15 an hour, you're talking $25 or $30. Just to, if you're a breathing person and you want to go out on the farm, you're going to get $25 or $30 an hour, okay? At least in the salmon farm. But the problem with that is it's going to take away from land-based agriculture or other sectors of the industry, right? I mean, agriculture and PEI, I remember Mary saying, we can't find truckers. So they pay them X number of dollars, you know, for trucking during the ag season. But there's so much competition just in the transportation business for labor that's part of the ag industry that, you know, so there's all kinds of problems that need to be resolved. So I think the outcome is going to be farmers are just going to have to bite the bullet and have more efficient employees and pay them more. But maybe government can help.
Great, thanks. Peggy?
Yeah, 2 things. This is a long-time problem. In the greenhouse sector, I have heard many times that they are inspected first by the federal level, then by the provincial level, then by the municipal level. We continue to bring, as industry and even leaders, to bring the fact that if you would accept the one level's inspection as equal as yours, it would reduce our paperwork and save you money. That's the discussion. Have we convinced them yet? No. But we will keep going. We will keep asking. The second thing is, today, the Prime Minister is coming. It might be the question for him today.
Have anything to add? We're just coming to the end of our time, so
I think it's just important to ensure that we're including government at the beginning of the process of some of these conversations. I think to both my colleagues' points here is that these are long-term issues. These are long-term conversations we've had. There's a lot of bureaucracy, I think, especially around labor. You know, like I was in HR, I was an HR manager, and I mean, even just hiring an employee, the process you need to go through is extensive, let alone if you're having a large manufacturing facility or a large operation like a greenhouse. So I think when we as the people representing you are going into a lot of these conversations, we need to make sure that government's been part of the process so that we're onboarding them into understanding our problems. I think secondarily is making sure that we're outlining what our key opportunities are. Like when agriculture does well, you do well, is actually a really powerful conversation to have with our political leaders and the department staff that they're actually getting information from. That's something that we're really seeing a lot of success in. So it's not a silver bullet, but it is a part of how we become successful. A lot of times they don't even realize it's a separate issue, but slightly with farm safety. In Manitoba, there's all these different permits that you have to have. And, you got to go to one, Department of Infrastructure, and then you got to go to Hydro. And can it just be one permit? And they thought, oh, I didn't even think about that. It's like, what? How did you not think about that? So sometimes it's just giving people a pathway, showing them a solution, and then helping get them step by step to that decision point. It's not easy, but I think sometimes we have to keep in mind our governments, the staff turnover is crazy. There's a lot of political leadership changes as well happening across Canada. They don't know what they don't know, so let's show them the answers. That's a big opportunity for us.
Excellent, great, thank you. And just to keep Scott on his agenda as well, I think it's a topic we could talk about all day, but just to wrap up, thanks so much to the panelists for sharing your perspective. I hope you all see that, this approach of taking a bit of a more innovative, extremely collaborative approach to addressing the labor crisis will lead us hopefully to better success in many areas. And it's a big issue. It's not just about attracting people. There's lots of things that keep them in place and that retain them as well. And we certainly welcome everyone to be part of the conversation. As we say, this is all very much industry-led. We're doing a lot of research, so you may be asked to fill out surveys or be interviewed or that type of thing. We need this content to reflect what industry needs and what your thoughts and priorities are. So taking a few minutes to participate in that type of research goes a long ways. It's heard and it's very much appreciated by us. And then you can also take this conversation, reach out to me or anyone else involved in the project to talk about how you might want to, have these discussions at regional or provincial levels as well. And again, thank you very much to CFA for their leadership from the primary ag side of things. It's been significant, and it has meant that this initiative's moving forward and that the voices are being heard. So thank you very much.